Okay, let's talk just a little bit about Missouri's infrastructure at this point in time. Clearly some things need to be done, and clearly there are some plans in place. But in your opinion, what's wrong with Missouri's infrastructure and transportation system right now?
Well, I think basically the problem is that Missouri has historically been the gateway to the West, but it's tended to lose that role in recent years, and the movement to the West has been on a more northerly route through Chicago and Omaha. I think Missouri needs to regain its role as the gateway to the West. There's plenty of opportunity to do this in terms of the natural movement of traffic and people in the United States as center of population moves to the Southwest.
You were talking in this case study about a new plan, a new system. What are you advocating?
Well, I advocate that the problems on I-70, which are well known to everyone, be addressed by building a new I-70 to the north of the existing I-70. And this is one of the alternatives that was originally identified by the Missouri Department of Transportation a few years ago. But unfortunately, the Department of Transportation, in conjunction with the Departments of Transportation of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, have moved towards the notion that our transportation problems can be solved by moving trucks onto truck-only lanes. And I don't think that this is a very good way of addressing the basic problem.
What is wrong with that proposal, in your opinion?
Well, the basic problem with it is that it does not provide the economic benefits that would be obtainable if they were to build a new I-70 to the north of the existing I-70, which would open up a lot of countryside to economic development. We've seen the economic development that's gone on alongside of I-70 over the last 50 years, stretching out towards Kansas City from St. Louis and towards St. Louis from Kansas City. And while there are a lot of objections that people have raised to that style of development, it has provided jobs, it has raised property values along the right-of-way, it's produced tax revenues from those increased property values, and we have the opportunity to consider different forms of development if people in Missouri want a different type of development than what we see on the frontage roads of I-70.
You're talking about an urban corridor here, but you're extending it. This is not just through Missouri, isn't it?
Well, I envision an urban corridor similar to the Chicago-Pittsburgh corridor, or the Boston to Washington corridor, the San corridor, that's San Francisco-San Diego corridor, where you develop more along the lines of a linear city development rather than simply concentric circles of development around an existing city. And so I see the areas around the interchanges developing into much more substantial small towns and small cities served by an outstanding transportation infrastructure in terms of highway and freight movement. In terms of a new highway, I would strongly advocate that provision be made in this highway for running freight rail lines down a much widened median strip. And that confers a lot of economic advantages. First of all, freight moves at a much lower cost per ton in terms of fuel consumption. It generates much less pollution than trucks, so it's a green solution really to move freight in a fashion which we need to move it in the future.
Now, you're also talking about passenger travel as well, rail passenger travel as well.
Well, that's something that's there as an option. If you're creating an urban corridor, you would tend to want to have improved transportation facilities for passengers, for buses, all forms of people movement in this enhanced transportation corridor. But it's an urban corridor in the sense that you are looking to develop urbanization, people living, factories, industrial parks, these types of facilities alongside of the of the transportation infrastructure that we're talking about. So it's highways, it could be high-speed passenger rail, or it could be light rail, or it could be any type of transportation that appears to be desirable and economically feasible in that corridor.
It sounds like a very expensive undertaking. What role do you see the private sector playing in all this?
Well, I see it being primarily the private sector endeavor. It's obvious that it is going to be extremely expensive, although I don't think it would be terribly more expensive than the proposal to add truck lanes to the existing I-70 and try to rebuild that thing in situ with all the disruptions it caused. Over the longer term, it would have much greater expansion capacity than I-70 has, even if you put truck lanes on it. But it's going to have to be a combination of public and private finance, and I personally am all in favor of having the users of these facilities pay for those facilities as they use them. And
so there could be tolls involved?
I think tolls are the way of the future. We're not going to have rising revenues from gasoline taxes. First of all, it's awfully difficult to put through the legislature's increases in taxes of any kind. But also, the revenue that's derived from gasoline taxes is going to diminish as we move more and more towards more economically efficient cars using gasoline or diesel or whatever, but also as we move towards electric, which is going to, I think, to be the wave of the future, as gasoline and all petroleum products are going to go up very, very rapidly in the coming years as India and China start consuming vastly larger quantities of these fuels. So electricity and electric cars are the wave of the future, and I think that the way that you're going to have to finance this is by tolls.
Okay, private financing. Are there examples in this country recently or way back in the past where private financing has taken care of a massive project like this?
Well, private financing has always played a major role, even in the going back to the 19th century. Canals were built by private financing. The Erie Canal, of course, was a state financing in considerable part by the state of New York. But we've had a lot of private financing gone into the roads, and we're seeing a movement towards more and more private financing more recently. The Illinois Toll Road, for example, is now privately owned. The Chicago Skyway has been sold to private operations. So there's many forms in which public-private partnerships are evolving in the United States, and in every case, tolling does wind up providing a major portion of the revenue to finance the cost of these new developments.
A key aspect, as I understand it, of your case study here is the idea of freight rail and how to deal with that. And that's a real engine to help Missouri grow, as I understand the way you look at it. Why has this traditionally been one of the least subsidized forms of transportation?
Well, historically, it started off by the building of private railroads, private building of railroads in the 19th century. Of course, the first big railroad in the Midwestern part of the country was the Transcontinental Railroad, and that was publicly subsidized in terms of the federal government issuing bonds to pay for a good part of the construction. But beyond that, most of the railroads afterwards were financed by British finance, built as private railroads. And they've remained private operations, private companies to this day. Private, that is to say, public stock companies, not government financed entities. So it's for historical reasons they grew that way, and trucking, on the other hand, emerged in the 1950s with the interstate as a rapidly growing industry, because the interstate infrastructure of the 1950s was much larger than it was immediately needed, and provided a subsidized path for trucking to grow very, very rapidly and very, very profitably.
Give me a crystal ball. Let's wrap this up with a crystal ball look into this. Somewhere down the road, pardon the pun, if there is this new I-70 built and there is a rail component there in the median of it, encompassing freight rail and also passenger travel, look into your crystal ball for me. What would this mean for Missouri and its economy?
Well, it means Missouri would start hosting a much larger portion of the overall transcontinental traffic than it currently does, and along with that, that leads to Missouri being perceived as the gateway to the West, more along the lines that it was in the 19th century. But more importantly, the fact that Missouri would become more a transportation center for the entire nation, a transportation crossroads, means that industry is going to want to locate in Missouri. It means that you'll get population growth occurring again. That means that Missouri won't be facing losses of congressmen as we're about to see. It puts us on a totally different growth path than what we've had in the past, because one of the great feeders of economic growth is the transportation infrastructures.
It literally is a way to get Missouri moving again.
Absolutely.